good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be joining us from as you watch or listen to this today. We are delighted today to have our first panel webinar. We have a great wealth of experience on our team today. We have two of us from Morton Hall, and we have two fantastic consultants, one from France, one from Hong Kong. So we'll get a real wealth of experience and opinion today. So I'm super excited to have our first panel. So those of you listening to us will already know, my name's Elise. I'm Director of Admissions and Marketing at Morton Hall. I've been here for 15 years. I've come through the academic route of English literature. I've had the real privilege to work with international families and consultants for my 15 years here, and I now do that full time. So without further ado, I would love to hand over to Laurent, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, please.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Laurent. I own two agencies in France and one in Italy. We place roughly 150 kids in boarding schools in the UK. Overall, 1,500 kids everywhere on a yearly basis.
Fantastic. And Vincent, if I could ask you to introduce yourself again, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vincent, and I'm from Ling Chu Overseas Education Hong Kong. We have been in Hong Kong for 10 years and been introducing the local and also mainland Chinese families to study in the UK from boarding schools to universities. Recently, we have been merging to Southeast Asia and also East Asia areas such as Thailand and recently Taiwan.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. And Frankie, if I could ask you to do the same, please.
Hi, I'm the Director of Boarding here at Morton Hall. I've been here as a staff member for about 13 years, and prior to that, I was also a pupil here for a long time. I've also been a head of maths here at the school, and I am also currently a safeguarding governor at a school that goes from nursery all the way through to 18. So I've got a lot of experience with pastoral care and safeguarding of pupils.
Thank you, Frankie. So Frankie, you're our first alumni as well. So you've got all the hats on today, alumni, academic, boarding. Right, let's dive in. First of all, we're going to look at the perspective from admissions, that relationship between consultants and schools as well. So if I could start with you, Laurent, in terms of what are the most kind of common questions that international have for you during the admissions process?
So that's a tough one. Let's look at two parts. The first part would be the academic one, and the second one would be more the pastoral one. From an academical point of view, the main concern for European families is the equivalence with the academic curriculum when they come back to France, for example. Because as some of you might know, French students don't usually go for their whole curriculum in the UK. They would want to have a 1-year experience, possibly 2, but then they would want to come back to France. So one of the key concerns is how to get equivalence, what will happen when they come back. Then from a pastoral care, I guess that the French are not so different from the rest of the world. They will want to know how they will be taken care of. They want to understand more about the boarding system, because boarding is not so common in France. It's more or in Italy even. It's more considered as a punishment more than a luck. So there is a lot of education to be done on that point, and also clubs and things like that. It's something completely unknown in the French and Italian systems.
Okay, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's a really valid point in terms of the students needing to have that parity when they go back and to be fully equipped to transition back into the system in their home country. And I know that from our experience that we know upfront from consultants we work with to be very careful about those specific requirements, because I know that if I've got a student from Germany or France or Spain, it will be very different in terms of what we need to fulfill. And we work very closely with the consultant who would then work with the school to make sure that even the reports might need to be worded in a slightly different way. We have to make sure all the subjects are covered, whether that be within a society or a lesson. So do you feel that schools are equipped enough to make that an effective transition? Because that needs to happen from day one, doesn't it? We need to be fully aware and on board with that as a school.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. It's very important that the consultant works in a well rounded manner with the schools, because sometimes the parents don't have a clue about what their own school requires, because each school in France has different criteria from each other. So if there is not a kind of a well-rounded process where the pupils' parents work with a consultant who works with the school, then we end up with completely crazy situations. We've had that in the past. When some French kids would go for a year into a state school in Ireland, the parents were not telling us anything. And then when the kid is back in France the year after, they ask us for the grade reports. Obviously, that's almost impossible to get. So when we work with boarding schools or private schools in the UK, then it's obviously much easier to anticipate, much easier to organize, and then the process is completely flawless indeed.
Yeah. And for admissions, I mean, obviously working with you, you're fantastic. You know those questions, you know that. But I think my advice for all schools admissions team would be to make sure that you also ask the questions of every consultant you're working with, what do we need to do here to prepare back? Because it can really affect the students' experience of coming if they've then got to catch up, and that's an absolute nightmare for them as
Yeah.
well. So Vincent, for you, obviously you work more with longer term placements from students from Hong Kong and mainland China. So what are the common questions you would get from your families?
I think very much the same as what we have just discussed, while at the same time that questions will be getting more in depth, in particular in terms of academic, that parents will mainly ask for the schools on what sort of further support in progressing to higher education. So the whole thing nowadays, when we speak with students and their parents, we need to make sure the whole thing is now considered as a long-term plan. What I say a long-term plan means, okay, now we're not just talking about progression. I mean, even they're studying in from year 12 onwards, then they're just 2-year curriculum. But we're now thinking something like from year 12 until the end, they graduate from their bachelor degree. So it's a 5-year plus. When this sense, we will come back to talk to the student and parents and say what sort of support, academic support. In terms of academic support, which means that not just for UCAS applications, but also for how far that the school can support students to progress to other universities in worldwide destinations, and also how far that the school can provide sort of professional support, or let's say any additional activities or program to try to support students to apply for professional programs such as medicine, dentistry, West medicines, or even health sciences, for example, which these subjects are probably in the current 5 to 8 years, that they are very, very popular by the Hong Kong and the mainland Chinese families rather than business, surprisingly.
So it's that longer term vision that this is the end point, this is the end goal, and how do we best get those students to that point as well, which, it's looking at that quality of experience, isn't it? Whether that be for 1 year, for 3 years, for 10 years, we want every student to have that bespoke provision for them to get them to, whether it's a 1-year immersion experience, whether it is, a long-term plan up to university as well. So that resonates across both. So if we move on to marketing materials, I know that often families will come to you both and say, right, my child is going to go to these schools, get them into these schools. And obviously you may wave your magic wand and you get them into Eton and everything all the time. How do you manage, I guess, parents and expectations, and how should schools market themselves? you know, everyone's going to have the glossy website and the brochures, but you're finding the right fit, aren't you, for your students? So I think my question really is, how should schools market their own schools to families within your countries? And how do you sometimes have to manage expectations beyond the glossy brochures and videos and websites? Laurent, shall we start with you?
So with me starting. I, how to tell this? I think agents, at least consultants, at least for us in France, we are drawn under brochures, website, marketing materials, and so on. We don't really look at them anymore. We want to build a trust relationship with the schools we like. Know what makes the school stand out, whether it's a specialty, whether it's an academy, a sport academy, whether it's just simply a lovely girls' school in the glorious countryside in the UK, with an amazing pastoral care or whatever. It might sound strange, but we somehow need to be able to make the link with I am an Orsi girl, and then boom, these are 3 schools that will fit for Orsi girls, and we will present these schools, for example. And then once we have made this connection within our brain or within our knowledge base or in our database or whatever you call it, we will then need to explain to the family why we selected this school for them. And this is where the marketing materials comes in. Usually now, consultations are more and more remote. So we need to be able, we don't need papers, we don't need goodies, I'm afraid. Goodies goes to our own kids in general.
No teddy
So
bears?
teddy bears. My daughter used to love it when she was 4 or 5. But so we can work on saving the planet by reducing the
Absolutely.
amount of goodies, and it will be more having video testimonial that we can show to our clients and mostly to the kid, because let's not forget that it's a transformation journey for a child to go to a boarding school. So he needs to see where he is now, what will happen to her, and where she will end up. So, for example, if I have a 12-year-old girl, I need to show to her, or see 12-year-old girl, I need to show to her how happy, enthusiastic, and thrilled is a 13-year-old girl in Moreton Hall, for example. And the girl will be willing to go, and then it will be a no-brainer for the parents. And that's how the marketing should be done today. So the glossy brochure, it's nice, but it will not make too much sense. The kids now, they want to go on the website and see videos of kids of their age doing activities that they love.
And I guess, Frankie, if I bring you in here, because I know that, you know, you're very passionate of kind of child-led, natural videos. We've done some lovely ones of our prep school. And I guess really your take on that as to why it is important to have those videos for the boarding side as well.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've acknowledged lately is really important to our pupils. So this academic year, we've been working on a couple of projects. I've been working along with our head of EAL. And the one that we're producing ready for September is a video which it does a couple of things really. It guides the pupils through the school. So it's taken from the viewpoint of a new pupil from the moment they arrive at the airport, what they can expect, what our drivers would look like, what the signage is, all the way up to being introduced. It sort of guides them through that very first day, hands them across to one of our pupils who then guide them around the school and the boarding house. And then following on from that, we have pupils then explaining from their perspective what they think are the most important things to remember to bring. So it's a video that is aimed for our international pupils. It's sort of by our pupils for our pupils. If I think about a funny example of as staff, we sometimes think this is what's really important. These are the things that are going to be the issues for some of our pupils. And when I sat down last year with our upper six girls and I said, what was the most challenging part of coming to Moreton Hall when you first arrived? They said, it was the dining room. I was completely baffled. That wasn't not what I thought was going to be the answer. To us as staff, the children can sit anywhere, but to the pupils, they know that year 9 sit over there and year 10 sit over there. So it's the unwritten kind of social dynamics that the pupils understand more deeply that we need to be able to get that message across to other pupils that we want in our schools. I think that's really important.
And I think also that the student's perspective, you know, as parents, I think I've got a 15-year-old, and I don't think he'd be too delighted if I chose a school for him and didn't include him in that conversation. He'd want to have a big say in that as well. So student to student content is so important. And Vincent, is that a similar kind of piece of advice that you would give? Is it slightly different for the families you deal with?
Probably will be quite different from my point of view. Surprisingly, in Hong Kong, most of the parents, they're very much intelligent. They will actually search everything online. They can do a lot of researches, even more than us. So in this sense, we usually recommend our school partners to prepare online brochures or e-brochures, as we call. Videos are a good option, or particularly for the parents who used to spend most of their times on smartphones or on electronic devices, will be easier for them to carry on to read the materials. While I will suggest some of the live videos, what I call live videos or live pictures that are taken by a third party, sometimes will be more persuasive. The reason is most of the parents nowadays will find or they will call the materials that prepared by schools or by ages as propaganda. Of course, personally, I hate this term. I won't see them as propagandas, to be honest, but they are reflecting the reality of the campus and most of the facilities. While for example, when we send our colleagues to visit our partners in the UK, we always recommend and ask our colleagues to take live pictures and videos that send them back to the office, probably within 1 or 2 hours. That would be the best. In particular, we will store them on the digital archive. So after some sort of editing, that we will send these we'll share all these to the counselors. So counselors can also share these to the parents who are preparing or who are applying to the schools to try to enhance their memories and also about the school. And what my concern is, or what my focusing is, how far that we can try to demonstrate your uniqueness your school's uniqueness on the material in particular. This is very important. When most of our parents said, hey, I know more than 300 schools in the UK. But again, I find most of the schools are very much the same.
And I guess that when you're looking at a particular caliber of UK school, everyone's got the swimming pool, the all-weather pitches, so it's differentiating and really knowing your schools and family, which I guess is where knowing the schools and having the relationship with those in admissions is so important, which leads me nicely on to my question of how do you assess the effectiveness of a school's admissions team? You can be as honest as you like.
No, it's how to tell this in a not so French way. As a matter of fact, let's take the best example possible. In France, we'll have an influx of application from clients somewhere around December. as this is past the first grade report and the first council of the teachers. So this is when the kids that are allowed to go to boarding school in a summer term will be decided. So we will get suddenly 20 clients, 40, 50 clients that will call all at the same time saying, okay, now we can go, let's move on. So we will have a couple of consultations, and we will end up on 15th of December, ready to send the students' files to our lovely partner schools. We will just break out for a Christmas break. And then we will have the clients coming back to us somewhere end of first half or beginning of second half of September of January, and telling us, okay, that's 1 month that we have done the consultation. What is going on? And then we will be telling the school, well, hurry up. And so, it's this kind of reactivity is key. It's important that each side of the pound knows the criteria, the backstop dates, the expectations of each other and the families. And then, of course, not spending. It's important that the schoolmasters entrust more and more the admission team to make decisions, because we see sometimes it has to go back and forth, and in the end, what happened, it irritates the students. It's also important, I keep on telling that all the time, to have different admission process depending on the length of the stay. You don't assess the student that will come for half a term in the same way that a student that will come for a year or a whole cycle, because it's a waste of time for everyone. Then there is the C word. We love to have our bills paid on time. We love to have the deposit of the parents repaid once the kid is gone and not 1 year after. All these kind of things. And to be fair, this is a key decision criteria, because we've had storms on social media and on bad reviews on Google, because some bursar took more than a year to refund the deposit, and this is outrageous in my view. So it's really a little tiny thing that makes a difference for a student and for an agent. And the school I was referring to has completely torched its reputation in France and with us and with everyone we know.
And I think this is, relationship between those of us that work in admissions with you guys is so important. And we put a lot of effort in on both sides to build relationships and to really find people you want to work with on both sides. It's so important, but it's not just that where it stops. It's the whole school, understanding the culture of the relationship between admissions and consultants as well. I think that's really, really, really key.
I think it's very important that masters realize that admissions are the face of the school to the world. It's not an admin process. It's really representing the school, as much as they do, by the way. And admission team should be empowered within the whole school. If an head of admission goes to a bursar and tell him, that's enough, pay the bill, it should be done in a very swift way, because it's impairing the reputation of the school, and all the marketing budget that has been spent will be wasted.
Yeah, it's a strong point. What about you, Vincent? Similar points to Laurent or slightly different?
For Hong Kong, as a very much fast-growing city, what we talk about will be efficiency and flexibility. Now, surprisingly, when most of the agencies here in Hong Kong that they have worked with probably 150 to 200 schools in boarding schools in the UK. Now, that's an incredible number, I would say. And particularly, every counselor within each agency have what I call a checklist. I used to call it a checklist. So they will try to, I should not say in this way, but they will try to they try to put an order by calculating or how they assess the schools. It will be from the flexibilities, how far the schools can offering some special to consider some special students. When I say special, it can be from SEN situations. We got quite a number of SEN students in the recent 4 to 5 years since COVID. Some of the students are very much over age or they're underage, but they still wanted to get into, especially in Hong Kong. We have some mainland Chinese families who migrate to Hong Kong, and both different states and cities, they have a very much different systems between mainland and Hong Kong. And of course, there are some other very, very different of sort of family issues as well to make the students that they're not able to enter into the proper year group within your standard. So flexibility is something that we consider the most. Second thing, like most of the counselors in particular for us will consider is efficiencies, what I have just mentioned. Efficiency means how fast or how rapid that you can respond to us. For example, if I have an urgent case, in Hong Kong, I can tell you what, we are still receiving inquiries today for September entry. I'm not joking. This is something that will continuously happen probably in July, August, or September. I'm talking about early September for September intake. So how fast that you can respond, and also we can offer to our parents and students that they will take that off, they will consider your attitude. When you reply them quick, then basically they can feel you. They will be very much impressed by your response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what we're acutely aware of as a team as well. There's nothing more important that arrives to us on a day, a phone call, an email, a text message that isn't with the consultant or with the family. Nothing else is as important as that as well. And obviously recently we've sadly with heavy hearts heard about various schools closing, and in those particular situations as well, the child absolutely comes first, but it's the speed and the efficiency, but the emotional intelligence and kindness in those situations as well, and not being kind of the vulture approach of trying to sell. It's, if we're the right school for girls to come to, great, but the most important thing is they go to the next best fit, because in their mind, their best fit has now closed. And I think that's really important in terms of responsiveness as well that we're seeing at the moment also. And I know that Laurent, it was interesting listening to you in terms of, families will come to you December and then it's Christmas. And I think Frankie and I were smiling because I am, we joke that, it's a 24/7 job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boarding schools, admissions. And it can't be any other way. I mean, Frankie, you live on site with your whole family, your husband's head of STEM, you're very ingrained. And my favourite is on Boxing Day morning, I think 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from a dad from Brazil, and I've forgotten it's my daughter's birthday, and can you help me order some flowers online? And you do it because, the families are so far away. We're here living the experience, and why wouldn't we? And it's really interesting to hear from different countries and in terms of different time frames you're working to. And we have to be super responsive to those as well. That's our responsibility. That's our due diligence of the countries that we represent here as well. So if we kind of move that over into international journey, and Frankie, I'll come to you because again, Laurent, you said at the beginning that maybe in France a perception of boarding is that it's a punishment, which is really interesting. Now, Frankie, I know you're super passionate about boarding. You were a boarding student. You've been very close as a boarding house mistress with those girls, and obviously now you manage the team of house mistresses. So really just interested to hear from you the support you feel is so important when students come to us at Moreton Hall? We've done all the admission stage, we work with you within that process, but how do we support students when they come to us from other countries?
Yeah, I think it is worth saying that from the French perspective, so my family all live in France. So when I talk about it, when I go over there, they just have no idea about it at all. And like you say, their reference point quite often is the Swiss boarding schools, which are vastly, vastly different to, the majority of boarding schools in the UK. And we also run, French exchanges, and the pupils, we can try to describe it to them, but it's still very difficult to do until you've had that experience or someone that has been there to be able to do that with them. So for us, it's really trying to ensure that journey from really the passover from the admissions team into the pastoral team is quite seamless, that's a really natural flow that happens. The admissions team obviously will have done, a lot of work with the families or the consultants to build a relationship. We then have that passed over to a house mistress who will then do a Zoom both with the pupil and the parents, just to give some more information about what the first few weeks will look like, what day-to-day things are going on, what are the important things they need to bring. They even go into some of the things about, different types of etiquette or things that are quite particular to our school that the pupils might really benefit from knowing in advance. They get all the usual things like the handbooks that are really helpful. They get the welcome video that I mentioned beforehand. Those are all the things that happen beforehand. And that relationship then with the house parent is really, really key. We find that we have mostly parents that are very, very engaged in the process. So from being handed over from admissions, most parents will actually stay in contact with the house mistress quite frequently, even weekly. And that doesn't matter if, they are arriving in 2 weeks or whether they're arriving in 7 months. They still have that sort of regular contact that's continually helping them feel connected and part of the school. Once the pupil actually obviously arrives at the school, they will have had contact with a pupil at the school because they always get put together with a buddy. Buddy systems are quite interesting. I would say that a lot of schools do them. The effectiveness of them, kind of mixed. What we tend to do here is we tend to give our international pupils 2 buddies where we can. So one would be a domestic pupil and one would be a pupil from the country that they are coming from. That's obviously not always possible if they're from a country that, doesn't typically send many pupils across to boarding schools in the UK. But it's helpful because the 2 different buddies can offer quite different perspectives. The British buddy is quite important because actually a lot of the international families are sending their pupils across, to have that British experience. But the international buddy is quite important because they've got that perspective of coming across, from overseas to study that a British pupil just won't be able to have. To make that system more effective, we do quite a lot of cultural training with our pupils as well as our staff. And we have a cultural training video so that when we have, I know Lauren mentioned, short stay pupils and things, often we have pupils arrive mid-year. We're able to kind of make sure that every new buddy does get that cultural training. But things don't always go smooth sailing with every pupil when they arrive. So it's really important that you have the check-in points regularly, both with the pupil and with the parents. The parents want to see what's going on. They want to see a couple of pictures, know that their child is settling in and what they've been up to. But we also have those backup situations. So we've got a health centre that's manned 24 on site, not just for sort of physical issues, but mental health issues. Also just pupils that are feeling a bit homesick. Got a director of wellbeing that runs a whole wellbeing programme. Within our boarding houses, we've got prefects from the 6th form that look after groups of younger pupils in a sort of big sister, little sister programme. And then also within houses, we have girls that are appointed as wellbeing ambassadors to then look after other girls within their own year group. So it's about having lots of different ways to ensure that everybody has got a way of being accepted, being incorporated, and being able to reach out, if something's not going quite right in the first instance, rather than just one system that relies on everything. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, thank you, Frankie. And I would say also, from a consultant point of view, when you approach us as an admissions team, more and more the pastoral, the boarding questions are so important to you now, which is lovely to hear in terms of all the wellbeing support that we give. But also be quite interested in terms of what your top questions would be for boarding at admissions. I'm presuming it would be percentage of boarders would be one thing that you would like to know. Laurent, from a boarding point of view, what would be top on your list that you want answers for when you're looking at school for your families?
Oh. In terms of boarding specifically, right? Yeah. So we look at the percentage of boarders versus total number of pupils. Then we will want to dig in on whether there are flexi boarders, weekly boarders, or permanent boarders, because that's complete different experience. Then we would want to know about nationality mix, because if Vincent absent 95% of the boarders, then my poor little French girls will be completely lost in the school, for example. So that's something that we will look into. And then exeat. How many exeats? How often are there? These kind of things. And how exeats are managed by the school. Some schools, as you know, Frankie, as you do, manage it extremely well, in a way that our friend girl suddenly 1 week or two before the exeat received an invitation from a British crewmate that invites them for a sleepover during the weekend, and they don't need to ask anything. They feel welcome, integrated, and this is a wonderful, wonderful experience for them. And in some schools, they just let the kids manage it among themselves. And we have calls from the parents that are extremely worried on the Monday or Tuesday before exeat, because they need to organize a trip to the Guardian.
Yeah, Frankie, do you want to talk a little bit about our exeats and the fact that we're open, and obviously the girls do generally make friends and invite each other as well, don't they? Which is lovely.
Yeah, so we as a school, there's actually very little time that we are off. We're open all of our exeats, all of our half terms, all of the Easter holiday, and we make sure at the start of term and the end of term there's always a period of time where pupils can arrive early and that they can leave late, because I know for families that can be quite difficult, trying to book flights where the cost is quite variable. And the parents want to do that to get the best cost, but also to ensure that they're not missing enough school. So we try to facilitate that as much as possible as well. So we have all of our houses, open throughout an exeat weekend, so pupils can stay in, which, quite a lot of them do choose to do. But obviously, you've got to be quite sensible about that. It tends to be that our older pupils are more content to stay in for an exeat weekend. They quite like to have that bit of unstructured time where they can just, have a lie-in on the weekend, to go on a bit of telly. That's something that they specifically want to do. Whereas some of our younger pupils, and definitely some of our younger pupils from European countries, even though it's only 2 days, they still want to have quite a lot of structure and a lot of things going on. So we are quite aware of that. And that's where we would then reach out, as Laurent was mentioning, to other families, for pupils to go home with them. If if a pupil's been here quite a long time, then they've already started developing some friendships. So we would reach out to, quite specific families. If they'd only been here perhaps 1 or 2 weeks, and they were still developing quite a lot of friendships, we have a parent representative, so a parent representative for each year group, and they have WhatsApp groups with all of the parents in the year group. So we would then approach the parent rep, who would then put out the message, in a wider forum to parents, and then parents would volunteer and come through to us that way. So that pupils have that feeling of really being included and wanted. And I think it's also important, to mention that it's not just about finding, well, for us, it is about finding somewhere for the pupil to go on the Exeat weekend. But actually, I think sometimes the British parents aren't that aware that having a pupil over is an option. And actually for them, it's a really good option. It's broadening cultural horizons and those things. So having that good relationship with your British parents as well to facilitate those trips home and those visits, I think is really helpful for both, the British pupils and the international pupils.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vincent, if I can pick up on Laurent's point about nationality mix, I know that this is something I was very passionate about when I took over a couple of years ago, and I know that will resonate with you also. And I think we went from something like 10 to now we have 24 nationalities, and we have a really great balance. And I know that that's equally important for your families, Vincent, as well, that they're not sending their children to a school where they're dominated by a particular nationality, and the landscape may look quite differently in the past, but it feels that everybody's looking for that healthy demographic mix of diversity and nationality as well. Would you agree with that, Vincent?
I would say so. I mean, in particular, most of the well, I would, but I need before I try to elaborate further, I must agree that in the recent 2 to 3 years, the situation did get some change. The reason is we are now focusing on several different groups here in Hong Kong, which including the local Hong Kong families, the mainland Chinese families, and also the Hong Kong families who have relocated to the UK under the BNO visa scheme. So when I say we are now focusing on 3 different groups of Hong Kong parents and their children, we are finding actually we are exactly having 3 different versions towards your answers. So of course, the 3 groups are very much welcome to a more diversified nationalities within a boarding school. The whole thing is some students or some families who find their children very new to, or let's say they will need additional time in adopting a new life in the UK in a new environment, then you basically that the families, the parents, in particular the mothers, they will request, for example, to have, further more Chinese families or Chinese students, the same nationality, to be in the school. But compared to the BNO visa families who have relocated to the country for a few years already, they do not mind. They welcome schools even with more British students as possible. They were feeling more happy with that. But for some of the local families here in Hong Kong, seems that we can see the change from in particular from younger mothers here. When I say younger mothers, because nowadays we are also emphasizing some of the grandparents who actually the major people who make the final decisions whether to send their granddaughters to study or not. Now, this is another very much what I say chaotic or complicated situations, and makes our work even more difficult or challenging nowadays. Grandparents will say, okay, so let's have a mix or balanced nationalities, while the younger mothers will say, I'm quite afraid that my daughter may not get into the new life in a short period of time, while they need to handle their daily prep and study. So they will prefer a so-called a more internationalized boarding schools in the UK. But basically, they have actually, when we find this situation, we will tell them, try not to mix up the concept of British boarding schools with the international schools here in Hong Kong, which
Absolutely.
as I described, that most of the international schools here in Hong Kong, they're very likely with a lot of mainland Chinese students, but so-called from a wide range of nationalities or the countries that we don't know. That's how we call, but they're actually Chinese international schools anyway. So that's why when Elsie, you talk about nationalities, I'm always feeling my feeling is always like very complicated when we've meeting with different students and the parents.
Yeah. And I would say that's where it's a duty of care on the school's behalf. And going back to what Frankie was saying, that we know that full immersion cultural immersion, language immersion really does help students to flourish. If they're choosing a quintessential British boarding school, they will get that. And I guess it's our job to instill that confidence that, you know, they will be nurtured, they will be looked after, there will be cultural respect on both sides. And, you know, we have teachers we actually have teachers from France, so their first language is French. We have teachers from Hong Kong and China, so their first language is Cantonese and Mandarin. We have Spanish teachers, so for our Mexican, Chilean, mainland Spanish students as well. So to really kind of give confidence to consultants and families that that full immersion, if they want a British boarding experience, is the best way. Yeah, we have international schools in the UK as well, which I'm sure are fantastic, but I guess you can get international schools back home as well. So I think it's really important, therefore, that we work with consultants and families to really show that, you know, schools are strong in this area because it's so incredibly important. And like you said, you're dealing with lots of different generation of family and mindset and tradition and culture, which we also, you know, need to be respectable about, but also to keep those plates balanced as well. And if we could move over a little bit, Frankie, to that kind of, there is an inextricable link between great boarding care and students doing really well academically, because we all know from our own kids as well, if they're happy, they're intrinsically motivated, and they tend to do much better because they enjoy their school life. What role do you think that the house mistresses play at Moreton to support the academic progress, whether students are here for a shorter stay or for a longer stay?
Yeah, I think before we just move on to Moreton, it's really worth mentioning that obviously for parents, the way that pastoral and academic are linked really varies hugely across schools, from schools where, you know, pastoral and academic are completely separate things, and you leave the boarding house in the morning, you return in the evening, and your teachers are separate, to those where it's completely integrated. At Moreton, we have our pastoral system where we have our boarding house staff, we have our academic teachers, and then there's some kind of crossover between those as well, whereby the majority of our house mistresses, they do an element of teaching as well. But the main link that links the things together is the tutor system that we have. So our tutors are all allocated to boarding houses, and then they look after a small number of pupils, usually around 5, 6, or 7 pupils that are in their care. And the tutors are responsible for meeting with their tutor groups weekly as a group, but also one-to-one, sort of 10, 15-minute session per week. And that can really vary from quite, you know, a quick chat about getting to know them, about their interests and things, all the way into, you know, doing comparisons of how well they've done in their exams, comparing those to the scores that they should be expecting, putting in action plans. They also then will liaise with the pastoral team and vice versa, because a pastoral element will be able to perhaps explain sometimes why an exam result hasn't gone quite as well. Not having those systems linked up can, I think, cause issues, or at least leave the pupil vulnerable sometimes in situations, you know, in an academic sense, where a pastoral team will be able to explain what's going on in their life a little bit better. But as part of that overall tutor system, obviously, you know, we really hope that children come and that they're really engaged to their academic studies. But there's always going to be some pupils, for a variety of reasons. Perhaps it's a language barrier. Perhaps it's that maybe they are a little bit lazy, that they're just not, you know, progressing in the same way that we would like academically. That's where we end up having our pastoral system, our tutor system, and our academic system coming together to put together individualized plans. That sort of plan would then be shared with the pupils so that they are aware of what plan they're on, and with the parent or the guardian. And it would be things like, or it could be things like, that they are going to have supervised prep sessions in the evening if they're a little bit older, where they have previously been doing that independently. They're going to hand their mobile phone in. It can be lots of those things that then the pastoral team are able to support in order to get the academic side of things going. The other thing that I think is quite important is that, because a lot of our house mistresses are teachers, they spend a lot of time with our boarding pupils, and they get to know them, what their interests, what their passions are, what they want to then go on to study after school if they want to go to university. So as well as having a tutor that's really, tailored to looking after them and their interests, you've also got an extra layer of house mistresses who are, looking out for the pupils and guiding them in that way. And I don't necessarily mean just in terms of, oh, I think you should study this, I think you should study this. I mean, in terms of some of our pupils will come to our house staff and say, "Oh, I really want to study medicine. I think this is what I want to do." And our house staff will be saying, well, oh, actually, there's some really good work experience that you can do at our local hospital. Let me see if I can organise that for you. So it's about having a really, really joined up system to really help each individual get to where that individual wants to get to. I think that's what's really important.
And I think that links also to admissions and our relationship with consultants, that at interview stage, the most important thing I want to know is a conversation with that student. What are you about? What do you like? What subjects do you like? Which subjects do you really hate? What things do you want to have a go at? And that doesn't matter if they're going to stay with us for 5 years, they're here for a month. It's kind of our duty in admissions to find that information out, to really know the family. So we'll have a family Zoom with myself, the principal, and the family as well as a second layer, and trying to tease out all those interests so that we know that student when they arrive as well is so incredibly important. And I know also, Frankie, leading on from there, that those students who would stay longer term, the support for even that end point of universities, house mistresses also support that kind of from an emotional point of view, and giving them tips on how to write things within their applications. But it seamlessly goes right through, doesn't it? Whether it's younger student, older student, short stay student, long stay student, every aspect of the academic is linked to the boarding, and it has to be,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Definitely. And parents have different expectations, as just as much as pupils do. And like you said, it's knowing the individual, because I've had experience, with pupils who are, 14, they know what they want to do, and they really do. They stick with it all the way through. And by the time they've reached, the end of their year 13, their upper sixth year, they've got this catalogue of work experience and journals that they have read, to get them to where they want to go to. And that's great, and we can really support that. Whereas, on the other end of the spectrum, we have got younger pupils whose parents and whose children don't want to kind of follow a specific route, and they want to have the wide berth of experiences, and we can do that for them as well. But you can only do that and make those right decisions if you've got those good relationships and you actually listen, to the parents and the pupils, rather than assuming always that, you have got the right path for the pupil.
Absolutely. And we know certain age groups, having now been a mother of a monosyllabic 15-year-old boy, that kids change at certain stages of their life, don't they? And, we can have very different mind changes and shifts in terms of that student and what they want. And that's why opening the door to as many opportunity as possible is so important for students as well. So if I may, it'd be great to end with a question each to Laurent and Vincent to start with. So Laurent, I'm going to ask you, in terms of students you have coming for a short stay, what should we do to ensure they have the best experience, that they come here, they fall in love with the British boarding school experience, and they go home and they feel that they can settle back into home as well? What would your big piece of advice be to schools to how to handle that?
But you need to see the experience split in 4 parts. The first part is all the admission process. Then the second part is the, let's say, the arrival process. The third one is the adjustment process. And then the fourth one is the advocacy. Traditionally, boarding schools are amazing once the kid has arrived and adapts so that the kid has the perfect stay within the school. I'm very keen and enthusiastic to see all the new videos of Frankie, because actually everything related to pre-arrival is the most stressful part for a teenager. and any work that is done on that part would have an immediate impact on how well the student integrates in the school. So that's really something that is great. It's really a paramount work that you have done on this part, I believe.
What about parents, Laurent? So often we have parents who have loved their students' journey and been on that journey with us and are still friends of the school. And they'll often say to me, look, if you have a student from France or from Spain, if they want me to join a call with a consultant and family to hear from a parental point of view, they'd be happy to do that. Is that of value, do you feel?
Yes, so that's typically the last part, the advocacy part. And again, it's very important. Well, it's again a question of trust between the school and the consultant. It really is working as a team, and it happens quite often that some parents tell us, "Oh, would it be possible to speak with a former student?" And sometimes we do have had a student that goes into the same year group in the same school, or a boy or whatever. And sometimes, yes, indeed, it would be very helpful to be able to chat with the admission team and telling them, can you help us finalize this placement? Because they need to be reassured about, how is the level of tennis, or how does the horse riding process go? And yes, so that makes a lot of sense. It's really the last part, the advocacy that I was mentioning.
I think also visiting the school is always great. And I'm thinking our students do the tours and, there's no filters there. They can ask any question. We don't accompany the tours. We want them to have freedom of space to ask whatever they want, which is so important because you want to be seen as transparent. If your school isn't the right school, you can't just fabricate and say, yes, we have this, yes, we can do this. Because if we're not the right fit, then it's not going to be good for the relationship between us, with you and your families as well. So it's so important, to be honest, even if that gives the answer that not everybody wants sometimes as well.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
But here the key issue is the time, because sometimes the families will wake up in February to join in April, and then or as Vincent was saying, they will wake up in July to start boarding in September, and then it's unmanageable. So we need to.
And that's the trust, isn't it? The relationship between the Mission Zen and the consultancy as well. And I've got a slightly different question for you, Vincent. So students that come up for a longer term and they have a wonderful time, they flourish, they do great in their GCSE exams in upper 5. And, for example, they've chosen their path, it's medicine. We know as a school we've got great medical super curricula, they know the staff already. But the students might think, oh, I might want to change now. What advice would you give to schools for retention for students from upper 5 into lower 6? Because we all want the students to thrive and do really well. And if they're doing really well in a school, and it's a school that still seems at sixth form a really great fit for them, what should schools be doing in terms of their retention efforts, particularly that age group?
We actually encourage students from upper 5, or even actually from year 10, to start think about or to plan about the future development. Of course, sometimes it's quite unrealistic to ask maybe a 14-year-old or 15-year-old to think about what they're going to do in 20. It's not even for 4 of us probably, but again, it is essential. In particular, when we realize that there are quite a lot of competitions or competitors for those professional subjects, such as medicine, as Elsie, what you just mentioned. Medicine is a subject that we are now encouraging students to start at least 2 to 3 years before they apply, that to try to prepare themselves. When we say preparations, it is not just about preparing for interview, preparing for the aptitude test, but again, to be equipped with the knowledge and also with the mindset. Some of our students, or even the parents, will help the children to try to find some sort of what we call shadowing. Shadowing services in Hong Kong, probably they have some friends that who are currently working in a clinic as a doctors. They will send their sons or even their daughters to these clinics for as a summer shadowing, summer jobs, even
Okay.
a lot of things.
We would call that work experience here.
Work
So
experience.
very similar, yeah.
Or even there are some summer programs that they're targeting for university preparations. So this is the sense that for upper 5 students, we encourage them to think and to try to work out. Most of our students nowadays, they just stick with the plans and thinking. However, they do not work out, or they do not know what sort of job or what sort of career development for their plans or for their dreams is. So basically, they need to go out and try. So we encourage students and parents to try to attend some sort of like summer programs, or to spend their summer vacations wisely by enjoying. Well, we use them enjoying it, so we're not forcing them to work, of course, but we're encouraging them to participate into different summer activities. So even for us as an agency, we also run a numbers of activities for them to join. So let's say, for example, for the upcoming summer, we have 2 different workshops for law students and also for the vet medicine students. So basically, they will join an external tour with me. So I will take these students. They're from upper 5 to probably lower 6. So they'll visit a vet medicine hospital to try to see what is the A&E clinic is. So I would say from the activities, from all these in-person experiences, that students from upper 5, they will know, or they will start shaping out what they are going to study. In particular, I'm sure that most of the admissions nowadays have find the similar, I call it a problem, okay, a similar problem for lower 6 applicants, that they do not know what sort of A-level subjects that they should choose to study from the combinations that you provide. That's a major problem. But again, I never see that problem, because when we advise them to start the planning, probably in 1 or 2 years in advance, then basically they can tell you in a more natural way, saying what sort of subjects that they are interested to study in A levels, but not pushing by their parents in a more compulsory manner.
So I'm guessing also the opportunity within schools, even for younger students, to get a real taste. I mean, those subjects like psychology that traditionally you don't study until A-level, economics, for students to start to get a taste of, what they might like or what they might hate, so that they feel confident, I guess, in the school and in themselves as to getting the right guidance for them in the future. So that's really useful for me. So thank you for that.
Indeed.
And Frankie, for you, so I'm still picking up on this boarding seen as a punishment. So listening to everything that Laurent and Vincent have said today, this is your time, Frankie, to promote that boarding. So how do we convince our families that it isn't punishment, or reassure Vincent for his families that it definitely isn't punishment?
I think there's a couple of ways. There's part of it is the relationship that admissions have with the consultants, and so that the consultants can portray what the school is about. But then the other part, I think, is what's portrayed over in the parent and the pupil testimonials, from the experiences, the lived experiences that our pupils have had. I was here till about 10 past 10 last night, doing various different activities with our junior boarders in the sports hall. And then one of the parents had brought in some ice lollies for them, and that's what we were doing. And I had about 30 children running around like headless chickens, with ice lollies, and it was great. It was chaotic fun. But it's convincing our parents, or showing our parents, that what we're trying to achieve all has a purpose, and that purpose needs to be one of 2 things. It's either about promoting personal growth for the pupil, whether that's, socially or academically, or it's about giving them genuine joy in their lives. wonderful, you know, to have all of the things like the academic process and you know, the personal development. And, you know, for a lot of parents, you know, that is the, you know, the pinnacle, and it's what they're looking for. You know, they're paying a lot of money to get that. But I know that I've got great colleagues that take care of an awful lot of those things. So for me, a lot of the time, I'm saying, right, well, it's great that we've got all those things ticked in a box, but I want to know that in every single day of every pupil that's our school, that they are experiencing genuine joy and moments of real happiness that are going to develop into memories. So I think, yeah, there's lots of different ways, but I think, you know, for me, it's about us being able to transfer that that vision that we have and that lived experience that our pupils have back across to our agents and our parents.
Perfect, thank you. And for me, a massive thank you to all of you. You know, Frankie, I've had the privilege of working with you for many years. And Ron and Vincent, you are wonderful in what you do, and we love working with you guys in your companies. And it's just so lucky for us that we don't work with loads of agents. We're selective about who we do work with. But that relationship is so important. And I know you work incredibly hard with your family. So a massive thank you to both of you. And look forward to actually seeing you both face to face in the next academic year as well. Okay, but thank you all so much for today. It was brilliant.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone. See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye bye.